right. Well, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our program. We are so grateful for everyone joining us this evening. My name is Judith Rolls, and I am the Senior Associate Director for Alumni and Family Engagement at Davidson College, joined by my colleague this evening, Anna Watson, who's our Digital Events Fellow. And we are thrilled to welcome each of you to this back to school class featuring Mary Martha Bledsoe Felkner and Hayes Woolen, both class of 1986. In a moment, we'll turn the program over to Mary Martha and Hayes for further introductions. But before we do, I just want to go over a few announcements. First, all participants have been muted, and we ask that you please remain muted throughout the event unless otherwise asked. This will just allow us to hear our presenters more clearly. If you're comfortable with it and you have not already changed your Zoom name to your first and last name, we ask you might consider doing so now. You can rename yourself clicking the participants button at the bottom of your screen, hovering your mouse over your name, and then clicking the more or ellipsis, the three dots button. And if you have a Davidson class here, feel free to add that as well. Just helps us to know who's on the call. If you have questions for our presenters, anytime throughout tonight's call, we ask that you please go ahead and use our chat feature. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see the chat button, you may need to click the More button first, and then you will see the chat option. The presenters are going to do their best to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the call during our formal Q&A portion. If you have any technical or other issues, go ahead and post those in the chat as well. Our staff are going to be looking at that during the call. And finally, we've enabled the auto transcription for this call. If you'd like to enable it on your end, you can click the Show Closed Caption or CC button on your screen and subtitles should appear. Please note that captions are not always accurate and we ask for your understanding. And now I am very excited to turn tonight's program over to Hayes Woolen and Mary Martha for our program. And Hayes, I'm going to toss it over to you for further introductions.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you guys for being here. I'm Hayes Woolen, Davidson class of 1986. I'm honored to be talking with my friend and author and doctor, Mary Martha Bledsoe Felkner, and discussing her book, In the Room, a physician's reflection on hurting, healing, and living. So I've known Mary Martha since we were in high school growing up in Charlotte. We both went to Davidson in the same class. From there, I went on to Wake Forest for medical school, and Mary Martha went to UNC Chapel Hill School of Medicine and then to Vanderbilt University, where she did her pediatric residency. We both moved back to Charlotte about the same time. That was 1994, and Mary Martha joined Eastover Pediatrics with Herb Clegg and some others on the line today. And she quickly became known by her colleagues as one of the most knowledgeable and caring pediatricians in the area. And still, everywhere she goes, anywhere I've ever been with her, she runs into people that hug her and tell her she's their favorite pediatrician. And she was also voted by her peers as one of Charlotte's top doctors. She now lives in Charlotte with her husband, Pete, and they have 3 grown children. As our friend Kathy Izzard said, whether you're retiring to explore your own next chapter, a parent seeking advice, or a patient working towards healing, this book, In the Room, has lessons for all of us and for all stages of life. And Mary Martha shares her experience as both a pediatrician and a patient in this collection of essays that are full of her charm and wit and wisdom. So I'm grateful for being a part of this program, and special thanks to Judith Walls and Anna Watson for organizing this format, and to Mary Martha. And we're very grateful for all of you guys on the webcast today, and hope this will be interactive to the extent possible. And as Judith said, invite you all to send us questions through the chat box. So with that, Mary Martha, as we're both about the same age, I'll turn it over to you. And I think we're all interested to know more about this new phase of your life, your retirement from pediatrics at age 56, which, a job you loved and were so dedicated to. And how did this book, In the Room, come about?
Yeah, well, basically my body imploded, would be the timing of it. I think that during the course of my living, I always kind of lived hard, and I don't mean crazy. I just mean kind of didn't listen to my body as I practiced medicine, as I moved furniture, as I did all kinds of things in my life, I always took my physical health for granted. And that caught up with me, along with, in say, 2018, 2019, my body started to sort of fall apart, my musculoskeletal system. Both my parents, my mom got sick and then she passed. My dad had to clean out their house. We all understand these things that happen in our lives. My dad passed, and it was my turn to be lead physician of the group. So that took extra time. I had happy things too with my oldest was a senior in high school, just a whole lot that went on. And I noticed there was a little bit of a intellectual curiosity shift as well. And that was my edge. So that had begun ever so slightly. And then my body revolted, and it was decided that I should probably retire. And then I ended up abruptly retiring and had five operations after I retired. And during all of that convalescence, well, the retirement happened June 2020. So the other thing that was happening then was COVID. And during that convalescing and then paying attention finally to my body, I journaled, and I always loved to write. I mean, my practice, the other doctors in my practice knew that, and I kind of was on the creative side. I'll fully admit, and so I wrote and wrote and wrote. I got a writing coach. I was just not ever planning to do anything with my writing. In fact, I had a patient in the last month, and her mother was like, "No, Dr. Faulkner, you're not retiring. You're not retiring." And I said, "No, but I am." And her daughter was ninth grade, sitting on the table, and she said, "So," she's super cool. She goes, "So what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to write." And she goes, "Cool." And I remember thinking, like, that is so normal to be 56 years old, practice pediatrics, and then become a writer. To her, that was like, cool. Anyway, during that process, after with writing and recovering and writing and recovering, in November of 2022, I looked back and saw what had been revealed in those writings. And I saw from February to November, boom, that collection of essays was a book. And I couldn't unsee that. And I was, good God, I got it. I felt compelled. And then it's kind of like going to medical school and becoming a doctor. And it's like I had to assume the identity that I wasn't comfortable with, and this whole learning curve that I didn't know anything about, but I was compelled to do it. And so over the next 2.5 years, finally published in August of 2025.
That's great. That's cool. Well, it sounds like you're doing a lot better physically. I hate you had to go through all that, because you had a lot of other stuff going on too. But tell us more about the book. I mean, it's obviously more than just a book about being a doctor and in the room. It's kind of like a guide to help us all get through the twists and turns that life has to offer. But give us a little insight into the book.
So I don't pretend to be any expert on anything other than what I'm thinking. And basically what I did in those essays, I'm a Latin geek. I studied with Dr. Laban when we were at Davidson. And I just always loved words. I feel like words can build you up and it can rip you down and tear you down. And they're so important. And the precision that we would use in medicine, I feel like we should use with the use of our words. And we just, as a culture, don't seem to do that. So when I would pick a word as my prompts, just for self prompts, and so the word exquisite or the word pause, and then I would go and dig and look at the etymology and the Latin or Greek roots of those words, and then kind of look and see how far or how close have we gotten away from or stayed to the original meaning of the words. And then I would start writing, and then all this stuff came out, and some of it was way out there. Well, a lot of it was way out there. But then I kind of used what I had learned from my patients, and in my role as their doctor, a different twist on those words. So it was, it just sort of came together. So the way the book is divided is 3 sections: foundations, 37 chapters with an epilogue and a prologue. It's first section is foundations. The second section sort of massages different ideas and is discerning. And then the last section is just some, it's called Whiz and Wit. It's just some last minute things that don't really belong anywhere else.
Yeah, you said that chapter on pause, I think, was a great one. And you said always being present in the room was at the top of your agenda. So everybody, each of the patients knew that that connection was real. They were in a safe place, and they had your full attention, which I think is so key. And now it's so hard. I mean, you go and you see your doctor now, and they're typing away furiously. They don't even have time to look up, and it's just a different mode that I think some of the doctors are in now, at least the ones that I go see. So, that one chapter, Safe, Alive, and Well, you talk about some of the patients you were able to help, and some that were really sick, and you said healing occurs in that pause period, that safe connection between patient and physician at the intersection of art and science. So, in that safe space, tell me more about what you're kind of describing and some of the patients that you were able to help, but what it meant to those families. Because I mean, as a pediatrician, I think you have to really be the voice for that child, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're all of us. And I mean, I think this applies not just in medicine. So, but as a pediatrician, you have to recognize that when you walk in the room, that area is the patient's space. And you're being invited into that room. That was very, very important to me, that humble place. It helps, um, it helps dismiss a lot of what's going on outside the room, all the insurance stuff, all the demands from the electronic medical record, all the people breathing down your throat. And I mean, I may seem like an archaic thing now, but I do think we have to respect the first thing is that what happened in the room, that you are invited into that space. And then the question is connecting with that patient is by understanding what they are trying to tell you and giving it a name, a diagnosis or a plan or something. You're given sort of the voice to what that pathology is, or you're trying to help a baby tell the parents, this is what I mean when I am, screaming bloody murder. You find a little tourniquet around the pinky or something. You say, well, this is why. So yeah, that was a powerful thing. The other thing, and we can't, still in the day of rushing, there are ways to cut to the chase. And the question is, what are you cutting to? To me, it would be the connection. It would be the connection with the patient. So I have a patient that this 8-year-old kid, and he would not talk. He just would not talk. His mother was one of our nurses. And finally, I just laid on the ground and clapped my feet together. And he just thought that was hysterical. And from then on, I'd had him until I was retired at 14. I had him. You know what I mean? In other words, I felt like I was going to get what I could as I grew with that. The boy grew with me. So I don't know. I'm noticing some other docs on the call, and maybe we can see what they would say in the room is about. And with the safe space, what I was getting at in the safe is that patients are vulnerable, even when they think they're not. And I learned that as a patient, having, been a patient for all of the different surgeries afterwards. You can get fixed. I mean, my back could get fixed, my knee could get replaced, all the things, but I was not going to be well and healed until I trusted who was taking care of me. And the physician was one of it, but it was the physical therapist. It was my massage therapist. I mean, it was like different people who were helping me, and I had to like kind of lean into it. I wasn't born to trust that because I thought I knew more. And so as a healthcare team, I mean, on the back of the book, I thank oodles of people who were like my medical team to help get me on the tangent because I ultimately felt safe. I mean, you think about it, people who are surgeons, there's no more vulnerable patient than that naked person anesthetized on the table. You know what I mean? I mean, that's remarkable. So it is a privileged place to be.
So
And I
have you
think
heard from some of those patients that have grown up now and have given you feedback on your
I,
book? And
I have had some really cool experiences after. Yeah, it's been very cool. It's really hard to the way you can accept it is understanding how important they were to you. In fact, I write a chapter about that, that we really care. I would disagree with folks who do not feel like doctors care about their patients. And in medical school, if you don't care, you got to develop, talking to my son out there, you gotta work to care, find something you care about, because that is extremely motivating when you're exhausted and you're worn down.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting to me is that when we were in medical school, we didn't have electronic medical records, right? And people weren't looking on the internet. And the internet was just coming around where people now to access, Chat GPT and they go search what's going on. And you wrote in one of the chapters, you said, internet does not provide healing. It cannot care about you. But in this day and age, everybody that comes to see their doctor has at least looked at something on the internet. And so most patients have self-diagnosed their problems through Chat GPT. They've got very strong opinions. Their family has strong opinions on what they think they have, what they need. Some of that information is true. Some of it's a little misleading. I'm kind of curious to what you think about this evolving AI, the evolving technologies, the anti-vaccine movement, all this information and misinformation that is in the palm of everybody's hand. How does that transform to your experience, patient experience, both in the room and on a bigger scale?
I think I would get very philosophical in the beginning, the risk of being nauseating. That there's always been challenges in medicine. One of the things that I learned very early, I was in residency or early in practice, was the ghosts in the room. There have
Hmm.
always been sources of information that are not in that room with you. Grandmother is a big one. Um, Lord, the brother, the uncle of the child who, is a surgeon or is in medical school, so they know everything. So they're going to run everything by them. There's these experts out there. It could be their, in the ancient days, tribe leader. There was input in all along. It's just that this is massive and readily accessible. So that's where it's so different. But I think we have to welcome the challenge because it's part of what we do. It's part of what we've always done, is to kind of tease out the garbage. Parents would say, "Is that really true?" And I'm like, "Well, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, that doesn't have a role." This policy, American Academy of Pediatrics does not have a policy statement on that. Are you asking me as a parent? I can give you my 2 cents worth there, trying to tease out for folks what is an actual medical question. But with the volume and people coming in with their hostilities, I would be curious as to any of the doctors that are on the call, and you too, because I haven't practiced in 6 years, and I don't have the immediacy of that feeling. I do think you have to know why you're doing what you're doing and what you're. I mean, for me, always it was about practicing best medicine from a place of authenticity. And
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got two daughters now going into medicine, and I think that their access to information is so greater than what we ever had. And I think for patients that have strange diagnoses or different things, they can actually find other families that are going through the same thing, which I think is a really, powerful resource for them that we did. I don't think we ever really had access to that kind of stuff. And the other thing, I think AI technology probably makes us better as physicians, right? You just have access to research protocols and oncology, chemotherapy protocols that, I think were a lot more fragmented back when we were practicing. So I do think there's a
robotic,
lot of great things.
yeah, agreed.
So I read a book Robert McLean recommended not too long ago, The Road to Character by David Brooks, and he talks about this eulogy life versus your resume life. And you have quite a resume, but I think that's a kind of a powerful way to think about how we spend our time and define success. And those of us in our class now are 40 plus years out of school. What are your thoughts on your own legacy and what insight do you have for the rest of us kind of thinking about our next chapter?
I think that both in my practice and in my writing, I find that kind of believe myself to be somewhat of a voice or translator. I feel like I may take a different approach to an idea or link two things that don't seem to be similar. I did that with symptoms, a rash and a fever that didn't make any sense to people. Then I could make sense of that, or two words that I might write about and connect those. So sort of a voice translator. I feel like I've sort of landed there. I would say that what I really hope is, not that I don't use some profanity, but I do think that respecting the words that we use and our choice of words is really important. And that I would like to be my legacy to be that I brought more awareness to words, the importance of words. What about
Yes,
you? You tell us you.
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious, the power of healing that's not necessarily science based. I mean, how did you approach it when, it's the art of healing, really, a lot of times, and just being there and compassionate with those families is so key. But, I think, and, you know, all of us went through, the quick response a lot of times was for doctors just to give antibiotics or whatever. Well, now, I mean, healthcare is a lot more complex than it's been just because the knowledge base is so much greater. Tell me what your thoughts are on, just the power of time and the power uh of healing without just dropping medicines. I mean, the whole preventive piece of healthcare for me is so key that it's not just a reactive mode of healthcare. It's like how do we go about living our lives so that it's much more, balanced, a more balanced life. And I think in our class, people are just living longer. So how do we live a much more meaningful life given the tools and resources that we have?
Lord. All right, I'll start with one that I can handle.
Yeah.
That last part of the as physicians, in relationship, even if it's not in a professional relationship, I would even go to say, but I'll use what I did. We have to take, we have to have the mental discipline and the time. Doesn't have to be extraordinary amounts of time, but we have to have the mental discipline to educate. And when I say educate, it's breaking things down into their basic components, not assuming that we're just going to write it on a piece of paper and send it out. Making sure that a patient, like asthma was a big thing for me. I drew it on paper on the wall. I saw so much misunderstanding of asthma. I think that the healing occurs when you continue to reach out and try to meet that person where they are, either intellectually as an educational, or it could be like at the end of life, like with the patients I described, that where all you're doing is hoping that they know that you are inspired by them, or that you're there with them. In terms of bringing meaning to life, I do think that mental discipline of the pause, that's one of my messages kind of through the book, is just sit with it. Sit with your thought. See what's actually there. I mean, a patient, I was taught in medical school, a patient comes in with knee pain and they are worried that it is knee cancer. And we know it's not. If we send them out and say, you're fine, but we have not told them it was not knee cancer, we have not done our job. And it does not take a lot other than the mental discipline to narrow it in, connect with that patient. I do think some people are more bent to do that than others, but it just means you have to practice longer.
Yeah.
You agree? What do you think?
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think you have to meet the patients where they are, but for pediatricians, meet the families where they are, and families it's just they hear so much information, and so just making sure that reassurance, that's a key component of it. But you dealt with a lot of kids that were really sick and really I remember you saying that you would wake up in the middle of the night and go to the ICU, even though you couldn't do a whole lot, just to
In the
be
early
there
days.
with the family. I mean, that's a really powerful thing, just to be there in person.
Yeah, they did. It didn't help the kid any. It helped me
It might have
to
helped the
be
kid.
there.
Yeah. So your epilogue, capital gains, and poem your dad wrote, that was when you were born. Tell me about the importance of that chapter and how it was important for you.
Well, I think that I put it at the end of the book. First of all, the discovery of the poem was ridiculous. My brother's baby girl, he found it, and he had his bins to go through, and I had my bins to go through from our parents. And he found this poem written on a little index card, and my dad had written, that made me. I could just see the whole thing. I was born at Presbyterian Hospital. He found it the week of her baptism, and he read it to us, and then gave it to me. I had never known that he had written a poem, so I thought that was pretty powerful. It made me think about seeing his handwriting, how I connected with him just seeing his handwriting, how important that is. Besides just the information held on that poem, just so the fact that he did it, but also seeing his handwriting kind of connected me to him. And I put it at the end in a chapter called Epilogue Capital Gains, because part of growing in an identity as an author, is recognizing that you're worthy of that. I mean, I am, whether I wrote a book, so that makes me an author, but whether I embody what I think that means or not, you either step up or you shy away. And I think that capital gains makes me think, wow, that's sort of a cool way of seeing myself, that yeah, I'm worthwhile, by including that.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so you said you didn't want this book to be about you, but about the reader,
Totally.
and about your patients and friends. So what's the one question you hope a reader would ask themselves when they finish?
I would have. I don't think there's one. What I hope the reader would do is, I give in the first section, I give some little for your consideration, some ways to do this. I'm hopeful that a reader will read the stuff, read the material, and being informed by what I'm writing, either about myself or my patients, digest it in a way that they think about themselves, and then reflect ever so slightly, even if that happens one time in the book, or even ideally, maybe even shift and think of something differently, because, like, oh, I had never thought of it that way. That would be super cool.
Yes, I'm kind of curious about Jack and my kids and this generation. What would you tell your kids when they're going to medical school? What would be your takeaways? And there used to be that book that I read, Pearls to Taking Care of Patients. What would be the one thing you would tell your kid or my kids about going into medicine?
Okay, so you see, you engaged in changing the world, by becoming, you're a doctor, but you're also an admin. You were doing. I was doing it in the room. That I truly saw it. So that's where my advice is going to come. Read the room. Be humble before the room. To me, that is everything. That will keep you in perspective. You don't know everything. Your patient's going to tell you what they have. To me, that's the most important part of medical school, and being a doctor. So that doesn't have anything to do with, like, the field. I mean, I think it's hard field to go into, because of all the changes. But they don't know any different. I mean, my son and your daughters, they don't know the way it used to be. You
Yeah,
know.
it's kind of interesting. I would tell them just get out of your own way that, you've got so much going on. And I know you were like me. You were always behind because you wanted to spend more time with the patients, more time with the family. So you got your nurse, everybody's getting all wigged out. And all you really do want to do is just spend more time in the room with the patient. And to be able to get out of your own way and let them sort of talk about what's going on. That would be my advice. Just to, I remember one time I had a mentor basically, and we went in the room and the patient was just wigging out, and he goes, "All right, I'm gonna walk back out and come back in, and we're just going to have a refresh. Let's just have a do-over. And I thought that was the best way to just sort of
That's awesome.
reset it.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I'd be curious, what some of the other clinicians
Agreed.
on the call think about some of that too. But I really do think, Mary Martha, I'll be ready for volume 2 when you get ready for the next book. But this has been a really good book, just reading it and sort of what goes on in some of your thoughts. But
Thank you.
your family too. I mean, I remember your sister. How old were you when
She was
she?
class of '88 at Davidson,
Yeah.
and she passed in '96. Yeah, she was 30. So yeah, I write about that. I write about that some, and I'm sure there are other people who had experiences like that. It certainly informs a lot of the rug can be pulled out from underneath you at any moment, and you just keep on keeping on.
What kind of impact did that have on you?
As a physician,
Well,
how much I was dependent on my partners, how truly you're so gutted, and when patients are going through, I mean, it can be a seizure in the office, or it can be death in the ICU, which are different extremes. That you can see that they're feeling gutted, and when you know that feeling, I don't think you have to know that feeling to be a good doctor. Like, you don't have to have a heart attack to be a cardiologist, but it sure does inform your ability to just not feel like you have to talk, because you don't.
yeah,
Also, one of the big things I learned from that was go ahead and say it. I mean, people would die, and I'd be like, would tell my friends, go ahead and talk about it. They're thinking about it, you know,
exactly. Yeah.
like you just mentioning it today. That's lovely.
Well, Judith, it sounds like you've got some questions from some
Oh,
of the others. You want to chime in and see who else has other questions?
Indeed, I'm happy to do so. And we actually just got a question here, it looks like from Catherine Addison asking, what are you reading now and any book recommendations?
from me?
Yeah, it's to you from Catherine. Yep. Or
Okay.
maybe, actually, I would say to both of you.
Okay. I got them. Um, I am reading Yesteryear. Yikes. At the recommendation of Sally at Park Road Books. Oh, you are too. That's hysterical. I am so angry where I am right now, but I am trusting the process. Um, and I've just finished The Line Women in Tehran with my book club. So this one I'm reading on my own.
Nice.
What about you, Hayes?
I just finished Theo of Golden, so read that with the group, which I loved, and I think it's kind of interesting how that book affects some more than others. It's kind of just an interesting read. I read The Dutch House not too long ago that Susan recommended I read. And then we're going back and reading some of the old books like Feral Sam's Run with the Horseman is the one
Oh,
I've got
awesome.
right now on my desk. But
Excuse me.
I'd be interested to hear what else Laura Rainey's reading.
Yeah, so that she just posted that question in the chat of what advice do you have for others starting to write a book? I'm starting to write a children's book about Lebanon.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. We'll talk. I think it's keep writing. That's the number one thing. Write every day. Write every day. Second thing, my writing coach has been invaluable to me. I'm a member of a writing group which helps keep me creating. Um, but my writing coach has been super helpful. She was really helpful with me in getting an editor. She was helping me in understanding the whole process of pulling it together with beta readers and the editing process, and then get my graphic designer and all the different things of actually putting the book together. But I think a writing coach, or just having coffee with somebody who just wrote a book like me. I mean, we're more than happy. I love doing it. I've had 2 or 3 people reach out from August until November on my Instagram page, which was new to me, for that very reason. They're thinking about writing a book.
Interesting. Very interesting. Oh,
Yes.
She says,
Agreed.
thanks from the book From Strength to Strength is one that I've just started, Hayes.
Good.
I
So we have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
I write about strength. Arthur Brooks is in my book. I quote him. Yeah.
Yay. So I do. I have some questions that have come in, but again, folks, feel free to continue to put them in the chat as well. But and Mary Martha, you've kind of talked about some of these, but there's still a little slightly different takes on what you've shared. So someone writes, "How did your experience as a patient fundamentally change the way you practiced as a pediatrician?" I know you talked a lot about the things you experienced that led you to retire, but what are the things that changed the way you practice as a pediatrician? And was there a specific aha moment when you realized your medical, well, when you felt your medical training felt insufficient for what you were feeling as a patient?
Uh,
Hmm.
it's really hard. So I didn't practice. I had one surgery, a big surgery that was needlessly emergent, um, before I finished. And I would say that I was very wrapped up in my own journey, that I was not thinking at all about how it helps me with patients, except, and this is, it actually gave me more empathy for pain because I had become what I thought might be a chronic pain patient, which just blew me away. And I had more empathy for pain. And I know that sounds terrible. I see at least one patient of mine on the call. And I did have empathy, but I didn't have nearly the amount of empathy as I needed to have for physical pain. Psychological pain, I had a lot of empathy for. What was that last part, the last few words? Because I really did want to answer
Yeah. Was there an aha moment where you
the
realized your
whole
medical
time.
training felt
The
insufficient?
whole
What? Yeah.
the aha moment was I did not get this. I did not get how important my role could be and how important the physical therapist's roles could be. Like how um, much I trusted them. I held my patient's trust very, but I didn't get the gut feeling, and I really did. Um, you're asking, am I going to feel this way forever? Am I? And they can't tell you, but they can listen. It is the art. I mean, I'm thinking of Mike Cowan right now. I mean, the art of managing us. I thought, a pretty sophisticated person. I was an idiot with regards to understanding my body until then, but I had to at 58, 6 to 60, learn to read my body in ways that I never had before. And you don't teach yourself that. Your people in your world teach you that. I had absolutely no clue as to how I would have done that for patients. Or even if I did, but I think I probably did because of how much they did for me. So that would be a big aha.
Yeah. I mean, Hayes, anything you would want to answer or add with any of that for yourself?
No, I mean, for me, it was my mentors, half of whom are on the call right now. The guys like Herb Clegg, medical school. You come out, and all of a sudden you're thrown in front of all of these families, and the last thing I was going to do is come back to Charlotte, North Carolina, and be a doctor. The practice of medicine. But man, Charlotte is so blessed to have such great and wonderful primary care doctors, specialists, that this community that just embraces you. So my aha moment was that you have so many other people that you can really call at any given time and just say, man, this is not something I've seen before, and how can we address this together? My very first patient, ground zero, I just went to his 90th birthday. And I remember
Oh,
saying that the family, and you guys would know him, but I was telling the story. I said, yeah, he was my first patient, like 8 o'clock in the morning, and his wife pushes him in a wheelchair and says, "Hey, you've known this man all his life. He is sick as you know what, and you're gonna have to fix him." And so I told that story at his 90th birthday, and he goes, "Well, yeah, Hayes, that was the first of like four cancers you found." And
wow.
you can't. I think Gestalt is something that's underappreciated now. If somebody's really sick, you just have to. It's a gut feeling like, look, we're gonna have to figure something out, and at what point do you put them in the hospital? But it is, as you said, it's a powerful thing, that connection with your patient in that room and trying to figure it out.
Mm. Impressive that your story, Hayes.
Mm.
Um, if wellness is being redefined beyond the exam room, what is one non-medical factor you believe is most overlooked in modern health today?
Non-medical?
Yeah, and either of you, I would say this is probably for either of you, but it's,
Yes.
yeah, it's what is one non-medical factor that you believe is most overlooked in modern health today?
Finance. I mean, I would say two things. One is preventive care. You know, medicine in the United States is very reactionary. Here's a problem, here's how you treat it. Here's what you do, here's how you treat it. And that preventive care piece, I think, is critical. Sleep. I mean, we never learned anything about sleep when we were coming along. And I think sleep is so important for overall health. And, now people are, see, sleep apnea is probably the most underrated disease out there. And people are learning now about the glymphatic system and how important that is in deep sleep and all that. But preventive health is probably at the top of my list, followed closely by financials. I mean, the healthcare overall is in huge distress. You think about Medicaid, how complex that is, and I mean, it's broken. I mean, I don't know how the underserved are going to get the health care that they need. And I just think it's as we approach our Medicare years, which are coming very quickly, I think it just keeps getting more and more stretched. So those two pieces I would love for somebody to, help address. But I think those are two of my concerns.
And I'm gonna go in the room. Listening, the art of listening, and not wondering what you're going to advise and what you're going to say, but actually listening for everything, reading the room and listening. And then how to encourage people to do the work of their life. That is what I had to do in my own journey. It took work. You can't just pop a pill and lose weight. Ha 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 ha. Right? I mean, the GLP-1, yeah, we get
No,
that.
now it's a shot.
I know it is. I was kind of being
No, no.
you can't just pop it and have it get better. You can on the outside, but doing the work of your life is um, is where is really the crux of what we're trying to do for patients. We're trying to help them. We're not just giving them an antibiotic. We're telling them to take it twice a day. Research is trying to get it so it's once a day for 3 days, right? But in the meantime, we got to. I mean, one of my nannies had to put Hershey's Kiss on each dose of the antibiotic for my children because I would forget to give it. I mean, in other words, that's bogus, but it actually happened. But doing so, you can't just get control of high blood pressure with your high blood pressure medicine. That's again taking the time to do. I mean, I'm not an expert in that, but you get what I'm saying. Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
One of the messages that I feel so just do the work of your life. There's somebody who having a knee replacement is just a full-time job. I've told my son who's going to go into orthopedics, I'm like, this is a full-time job, and you have got to prepare your patients in that way that it is going to take everything they had. It is I'm not trying to generalize my experience. I went back and talked to my surgeon about it, and you have to do the work or you're not going to get that. And you can complain and complain and complain, but you have to do the work.
Yeah, and what's an aside to that, Mary Martha, is you can address people's physical problems, but a lot of patients have so much stress going on in their lives, and the physiology of stress is something that we really didn't appreciate, or I didn't appreciate, and what an impact that has on your overall health, right?
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, the body keeps the score. It's part of my story.
Yeah. So you're saying you had stress all along?
I just no, no, no. I mean, I'm sure I was a bit of a stress monger at some points, maybe once or twice. But the sometimes you can't avoid all those life events happening at one time. Sometimes a personality will draw stress to it, but recognizing that that you have a headache, just taking ibuprofen and calling it a day because it got better, which is how I always did it. Never thinking about adjusting anything, modulating the stress. I would just take the ibuprofen and get better, you know?
Well, and you said it too, like when your sister died, just talking about it with a friend or, family can make a world of difference. Just making sure that you've got those connections. I think that's probably one of the most important things we have are the friends and family that we have that you can talk to and when you need them. So that's a key piece of it.
Absolutely. And that's actually an interesting tie-in. So another question was, Mary Martha, why was writing the essays the right medium for your reflections? Does the act of storytelling itself have a role in the healing process for a doctor?
That's fabulous. I love that question, and I think it probably does. It because of the biological connections between the hand and the neurons. I mean, you can read all about it, and it actually is healing. So you can use the creative side of your brain, and just mechanically, I think it probably does. For me, I was mostly journaling. And I had a friend print it out because one of my writing groups told me, print out everything you've written, just see what you got. And there were 453 pages that I tossed. There was so
Hmm.
much that was almost 2 years, 18 months of writing that absolutely had to be written in order to get to the meat of the book. So I wasn't writing. I didn't just say, I'm going to write essays. I wrote and wrote and wrote and then looked back and saw that the essays. But moving forward, you're absolutely right. Um, I could see that as a healing process. Certainly, it is healing for nonfiction. I'm not a fiction writer. For me now, because that happened. I do know, can write an essay. Um, I wish I didn't, because I loved that whole process. It was really cool.
So Davidson worked out for you. Just the whole liberal arts education.
Oh my gosh, I wasn't pre-med. I had one chemistry at Davidson. So yeah, I wouldn't trade that for the world.
That's great.
Hayes, there's a question for you that says, as a practicing physician, do you find that the abundance of data we have now makes it harder or easier to listen to a patient's actual story?
Yeah, I would have to admit that I'm not practicing all that much, although I do some still. But I think to me, it makes it more fun actually, because patients are coming in, they've done a ton of research, and I think it makes us actually smarter on some of these diagnoses. We have a friend that just got diagnosed with something that I had read about, once in my life. And she's got it, and her question is, well, how do I talk to others that have the same thing? And it's a blood disorder. And so I think that having that access to information probably in that minute in the room can be a bit overwhelming because the differential can be 20 things long. But as Mary Martha said, our job would be to just say, well, look, we can rule these things out pretty quickly, and let's get to what you're really, really concerned about. And so I think technology, AI in the palm of our hand is going to make healthcare much more efficient and make us as providers smarter.
I mean, Mary Martha, anything you'd want to add? I know.
No, I thought that's great.
Okay. Um, it says the session mentions managing life transitions. And so, how can we use the physician's perspective of resilience to handle non-medical life changes like retirement or career shifts?
The words that I picked, while I use the physicians, my own professional examples, because that's what I did. It really, you could insert whatever your profession is, or even if you're a caregiver, if you care about anybody, just like if you're caring for a parent, or caring for a client, caring for a child, the fundamentals that the essays address kind of gets at those movements, but that question. So, for example, the chapter on pause it talks about pause and relationship, that's what enabled me to take that first step with a patient, that the inherent pause. That's true in any relationship, and we know that. I'm not. It's hard for me to answer that question because it's really the whole book. That's what the whole book is about. It just uses examples from my professional world.
Got it. Hayes, anything? I know that was about the book, but anything you want to add?
No, I'll just say doctors can't ever retire.
Oh,
They, they they just keep pedaling on the cycle.
oh
But
goodness. Um, Laura just asked another question. What do you both think about more physicians becoming concierge doctors with a monthly fee not covered by insurance? Positives, negatives?
I understand it because I understand folks want ready access, and if they can afford it, they want to have it. I could, and I respect some of the. I don't know a lot of them, but I do know a couple, and I respect their journey and wanting to provide that for folks. I personally would have my whole practice would have not been fun for me. I loved taking care of all socioeconomic diversity, all different, different types of people traveling from all over who we're all just in the trenches together. And I would have, I'd never wanted to do anything like that. It just would not have been fun for me. What about you, Hayes?
I would argue that you did practice concierge medicine just the way you did it. You would give out your cell phone number and you would spend as much time as the patients needed. So in my mind, that's concierge healthcare. And I think the pro would be of concierge health is that instead of trying to see 30 to 35 patients a day to make it feasible for the practice, you can condense that and maybe say see 10 to 12 patients a day. The problem with it is, well, then who's seeing, as you're saying, who's seeing all the other families that need care? And I think that's the rub. But there's no question that is a two-tiered kind of system. And we just have to figure out, well, what's the best model going forward in an age where there's 100,000 too few primary care doctors just in the Southeast. I mean, we have to figure out how to better utilize the resources we have in place, including nurse practitioners and mid-levels. But I think concierge health is certainly here to stay, and their focus on the well-being, overall well-being of the patient's a great thing. It's just how do we make sure everybody has access to that level of care?
Agreed.
I've got two more questions. So medicine has changed drastically since 1986. What advice, what advice do you have for young medical professionals who feel disillusioned by the administrative and transactional side of the field?
I'm just going back to how I worked, which was in the room and not administratively. But you got to know what your compass is. You can as long as you know. I mean, I always knew best practice medicine. That meant I studied, I talked to my partners, I went to a CME, I learned, I was on my game from a place of authenticity because you will burn out if you are trying to do it like everybody else. You have to do it the way you were designed to do it, so to speak. Somebody else's compass, maybe I'm going to get through 30 patients a day. Okay, well, whatever. Know what that way you can fend off all that comes at you. That truly. Okay.
Yeah, I would say the practice of healthcare is incredibly complex. And getting back to the finance, I wish medical schools taught more economics and finance and the administration of healthcare because you have to know, you can't ignore it. You just have to be part of it because the system is so big and so complex.
Hmm, interesting. Well, as a final question, I have looking back, kind of again, a retrospective, looking back to when you both graduated in 1986, what's the one thing about wellness you wish you had known then that you only understand now?
That the body does keep the score, both the physical and your mental well-being. And I did know what it was like to have curiosity about my psychological state. I was curious about other people's. I was a psych major, I was bent that way. So I just kind of followed that. But I didn't have anything in my health that made me be guarded or aware to keep a check on my own physical health, even though I had signs, but I did not think of them as signs. And that I had more curiosity about what my body was doing beyond its performance of life.
That's a good answer. I mean, I would literally say that what I didn't know then was the importance of sleep. And now you can wear a whoop on your wrist and see what level of sleep you get during the day. I think sleep is really important. But the thing I took for granted in 1986 when we were all at Davidson is the power of those friendships. And if you're having those friends now, how 40 years later, and the importance of those connections and friends, I think is one of the most powerful things we have. So I'm not sure I fully understood that back in the day.
Well, and that plays into more of that, the mental health piece of it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank both Mary Martha and Hayes for speaking with us tonight and leading us in this really insightful class. It was fascinating. I know for me it was fascinating to listen to Mary Martha. You bring your book to life, and Hayes for his thoughtful questions to kind of get at what's going on in what's going on in the room. um, really excited to dig in more to the book. For everyone on the call, thank you for joining us. A follow-up email will be sent to the folks who joined us tonight with contact information about our speakers, a short survey, some other helpful information. And for any local folks, there'll be some information on an event being sponsored by the Charlotte Regional Chapter on May 20th, featuring Mary Martha talking about her book. So we hope any local Wildcats might join us that evening. Do note that this event was recorded and will be available on the back to school website on Davidson's website in a few days, or let's see, today's Thursday, actually it'll be next week. It'll be available on the website next week, forgetting what day of the week it is. And so definitely take a look for that recording. Encourage anyone to listen back to parts tonight that would be really helpful, and to share the link of the video to anyone else who you think would be really interested to hear what was shared. I know we've got lots of folks who would surely want to hear what was discussed tonight. So again, want to thank Hayes and Mary Martha. Thank all of you for joining us and taking the time to be a part of this program tonight.